that the closer I get to God, the more I realize the people I thought had a relationship with God are actually very far from Him. And that the more time I spend in His Word, I start to realize that the people that speak for God don't even sound like Him. I was reading Matthew chapter 26, where Peter denies Jesus. And right before he denies Jesus the third time, something amazing happens. Watch this. Matthew 26:73 NIV. After a little while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, "Surely you are one of them, for your accent gives you away." It amazes me how in the midst of Peter denying even knowing Jesus, he can't help but to sound like somebody who does. The next verse talks about how he has to curse and swear in order to get them to leave. He had to sound more like them to disassociate himself from Him. And if our mission is really to connect people with Jesus, we have to ask ourselves the question, who do we sound like, Him or them?
So I am truly amazed at the capacity of Christians to be able to just make things up in order to fit some type of paradigm to which they are believing in today. So what am I talking about? So when you listen to what this young man was talking about, I was wondering, like, where in the hell could he go with this? And he's talking about how when they questioned Peter the third time, his accent, they questioned his accent, and that's why they thought that he was with Jesus. So let me break down the true content of what's going on here and put it in context. So in this time frame, it is not like how we are today. You go to the city of Atlanta, and you may find multiple accents from all over the world because it is such a transient city, right? But when I was growing up in Atlanta, there was a very distinct way that people in Atlanta spoke. And it depends on what side of the city you were from, you may have different dialects, okay? So I grew up on the north side of Atlanta, so it was more of a Midwestern type of speech pattern. But if you were to go to Decatur near Gresham Road, it was more, and man, the boy from Gresham Road, what you doing around there, boy? What you going to wind up into? It's more of the dialect that you might hear from somebody around Gresham Road, because they from the dead, and so it was different. But you can identify if a person, you was at a club or something, you met downtown, or you was at an event, and you hear somebody speak, and they claim that they were with another group of people from the north, but they sound like they from the deck, then you knew they were from the deck. If they spoke a certain way, and you knew they were from like the West End, so they had a different dialect within the city. So back in the early first century, people didn't travel as much as we travel today. You were born and raised and usually stayed in your city. When people would go to Jerusalem, which was the capital, okay, now this is the more transient type of environment. So you can tell where a person is from. Now, the teachings of Jesus started in Nazareth. He came from Galilee. So there was a specific dialect that the people in Galilee spoke, and therefore they identified Peter as being with this Jesus because of his Galilean dialect. So this person is just trying to point out Matthew. But when you look at the same story in Luke, it specifically says that certainly this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean, right? Let's look at. So when you look at Mark specifically says, surely you are one of them. You are a Galilean. So what this young man has taken to say that he sounded like Jesus, and you gotta sound like Jesus even when you deny him, you still sound like you know him. They were literally talking about the accent and knowing that this group of Galileans who had came in to Jerusalem during the Passover were from, that all of them spoke this same dialect. They were all similar in their speech pattern. So therefore they were kind of grouped together. So if you were to go to an international convention, so when I was in the Marine Corps, I was in Germany, we did a lot of international events, and you can tell these people were with the Scottish delegate. These people were with the Nigerian delegate. They're with the French delegate. They're with the the Turkish delegate. Why? Speech pattern. You can easily determine who's with who most likely because they were all from the different, they all had their different speech patterns that you was able to recognize the accent and know where they're coming from. These, since Russia was one of my theaters of interest, then I knew the Russian delegates and I knew their speech patterns, and I can tell like who was from Stalingrad and who was from Moscow and who was from Leningrad. I could tell the difference because of the different dialects to which they spoke. This is all that's being talked about here. That they could tell that he was with him because he was with the Galileans who had came in claiming to be the Messiah. And mind you, there were multiple people at that time frame claiming to be the Jewish Messiah who would break them free from the Roman government, but break them free physically. So this is a bunch of horseshit. And the fact that he started cursing at them is not that he started sounding like the people of Jerusalem or like the Romans. It's the fact that in order to get rid of the people, he got angry. He started cursing them. It will be the same way that with me being from Atlanta and wearing this hat, and when we stopped at, we were on our way to San Antonio, and when we stopped at this one restaurant, this lady has automatically assumed that because of my dress, that I was from Texas, but I told her I was from Atlanta. So it would be as if I got angry with her and started cursing her out and saying, "Be on what the hell you talking about? I'm from." It would be like that, and that is all that is saying. That's the harsh aspect of religions, is that you get a bunch of different doctrines because people will read into it whatever they want, and you can find commentary on that piece of scripture that some of the commentary people are saying, oh, he was, what they really recognized was the heart that he had, and that's why he started this, that not his accent, because people will make things up in order to validate their religion. But what do you guys think? Always remember, you gotta free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibration.